The following is brought to you by the Social Suplex Podcast Network.
This is Great Match Generator. And welcome to Great Match Generator, where we look at great matches and see what made them great. I am Danny Kukler, and this is the first episode of 2021. Yes, the government did not fall. Yes, we are all here. Yes, it's 2021. We are all here. I'm with Greg and Matt.
Yeah, we are all here still, so far.
So far, the world hasn't ended.
Sure does seem to be trying, though.
Yep. Greg, have any thoughts on my intro?
Good job.
Good job. Yep. Dire straits. But we obviously condemn all the violence that's going on around in the world today. It just sucks to see everything going down the way it's going down. Of course. But we're here to talk about wrestling.
Yes. Where violence is okay.
Where violence is okay. And we have 5 matches on the docket today because we're paying tribute to one good soul, Brody Lee, who passed away recently at the age of 41. So we decided to pay tribute to him by rewatching The Shield versus the Wyatt family from the Elimination Chamber, 2014. February 23rd to be exact. WWE. Then we watched John Cena, Brock Lesnar, Seth Rollins, 125-15, which I was at live. So you may get some live perspective. as well as some thoughts I have watching it back. Triple H, Steve Austin versus Chris Benoit and Chris Jericho from May 21st, 2001, WWF. Then we go all the way back to 1989 to see Jushin Liger versus Naoki Sano from August 10th, New Japan Pro Wrestling. Then we go all the way back to March of 1969, The Destroyer, Dick Beyer versus Giant Baba.
Quite a lineup.
And we start in date order, so to Greg's chagrin, we're starting with Giant Baba.
I got nothing against Bob.
I know you have nothing against Baba, but you were very lukewarm on Baba the last time. I sort of get it with Baba in this match.
I just I think older wrestling tends to be slower, so it can sometimes be a slog depending on the match.
I thought this match was very engaging, honestly, because I thought that Dick Beyer's heel work was very... Destroyer's real name is Dick Beyer. He actually got Japan's highest citizen honor, actually, which was very apropos because he was an American.
Yeah, and he got it for his like work, like his cross-cultural work, I believe is how it was worded, or something to that effect. Essentially, like his work in, being an American working in Japan, kind of bridging those gaps between cultures, between nations in this pop culture niche world, is how I understand that the reason for his award.
Yes, but he really injected personality into this match.
Mm-hmm.
Greg, what were you going to say?
I was just saying, all I know is he was really funny in this match. Baba's good and all, but I had no idea who this Destroyer guy was going into this, and he's awesome. He's so funny the whole time. This is just, like, classic textbook heel work, like, you'd get on day one of wrestling training.
I describe this match as like a prototype of like the classic heel versus face dynamic, like a boiled down version of what that looks like in wrestling generally. So, obviously this is a match from 1969 and Giant Baba's involved. So we're stripping away a lot of the frill that we might associate with wrestling sometimes. We're getting down to pretty simple, relatively speaking, grappling and offense, but they tell just a really easy to understand heel versus face story, and I think they do that as well as just about anybody. And I kind of agree with Danny. I think it's really engaging grappling for the most part for a match that goes almost 60 minutes. So it's technically a 60-minute draw, but it pretty famously doesn't actually go the 60 minutes. For a match that goes almost 60 minutes, I don't think doesn't drag that much to me personally. You really see them kind of elevate the action and the counters and the speed as they go. And when you look at these two guys, you do not think that they are going to have the athleticism to do what they're doing at the 50-minute mark. But I think they really are. This is probably either man's most impressive performance, but an all-time performance by Destroyer. Absolutely, really funny, jaw-jacking at the referee, jaw-jacking at Baba. He's using the every heel trick in the book, and I think he does bring a lot of personality to a match that Baba brings his Baba-ness, for lack of a better term, but
Baba-ness.
But Destroyer, I think, helps translate that a little bit to a broader audience. I think, I could see this match, even though it's a little longer, being maybe easier to get into if you've never watched like Giant Baba, for example. If you've never watched him, I think this match is probably easier to get into than the Billy Robinson match you all watched a while back. But I love both matches. I actually think both of them are all-time classics. But this one's probably a little bit more translatable to a broader audience, is my take.
Yeah, this one was a little easier to digest than the Billy Robinson match, to me, because just the heel work was very engaging, and the chain wrestling early really led to something, which I thought the arm work early on led to Baba selling off the arm really well, which I appreciated.
And I really like the crowd. Like the work with the crowd was what got me into it, because like you'd have these I mean, my only criticism really is just the length. It was like you said, an hour-long match, and so there was obviously these long kind of rest holds. These days, you see, for example, the stereotype is Randy Orton doing a rest hold. You get bored. But here, it was like, if the heel was in a hold, everybody's like cheering and like, haha, you're getting your just desserts. If Bob was in the hold, everybody's like cheering him on to like, fight through the pain and get out of it. And just the whole crowd was into everything. When Baba would like wrench a hold, they'd like cheer every single time. It was so good. I think this is like a perfect example of how a crowd can make a match.
Yeah, I would also add that I think that there are good ways of doing your classical rest holds, or what we often consider rest holds, and then there are bad ways of doing them. And I think that a lot of your really high-end people from the 60s and 70s that we still remember in the matches that we go back to, like this one, it's a large part of it is that they're just doing basic things really well. They're grinding things in. They're adding little flares here and there, right? Like I think there was a moment in the match where Baba had like a leg scissors around Destroyer's waist, and he was sort of like cranking on that. Destroyer's back was to him, right? So instead of just like sitting in that and like pretending to squeeze tighter and tighter, he would like literally roll back and pick Destroyer up and drop him on his tailbone. It did this like a few times, and just the little things like that, and even like just grinding in the hold, selling how much the struggle of putting the hold in, how much struggle that takes. That stuff sets those slower moments apart a little bit. And there are people in modern wrestling who do that as well. It's not just a generational thing, I don't think at all, but they do it really well here because they're depending a lot on it. That's where they're telling the story. And one last two really quick things while I'm thinking about them before I forget. I really love when Baba tries to pull Destroyer's mask off. I thought that was like a really cool part of the match that added a little bit to it. I'm a big fan of in lucha where you get mask rips in big time stakes matches, particularly. I think that is just a really easy way to elevate a match pretty quickly in my book. And I think you get something very similar here. And I also had not really thought of Baba in this way. Baba's really good at selling with his facial expressions. I think he sells exhaustion and pain and struggle really well, like deceptively well, in kind of how expressive he is. And I don't think I've ever really noticed that in him before. I watched this match and then I got the desire to watch more Giant Baba, so I ended up watching another Baba match after this, a much shorter one. But I really found that was something that he was pretty good at. So those were kind of things that I noticed on this watch. It's only the second time I've watched this match, and but I think really highly of this match. I think it's a genuine all-timer.
I still think this is very good. I don't think it's an all-timer. I think it's a masterclass in basic heel face psychology, but it's hard for me to call it an all-timer, honestly.
Sure.
Just for my tastes in wrestling. But I do appreciate it. I rated it 4 stars. Destroyer's work here was very good. Baba held his end very well, and I had to respect it. I gave the Billy Robinson match 3.5 or 3.25, so this was a huge improvement.
I was just gonna say that Destroyer really reminded me of Andy Kaufman. And everything he did in wrestling, there was just like this over the topness to his antics that I really feel like that kind of kindred spirits in that way. I also loved the mask ripping spot, or pulling spot, I should say. That was really funny. I wrote in my notes here, like, it's a little thing, but he pulled it up where the mouth, his nose was sticking out of the mouth hole.
Yeah.
And like the way, if you look at that, not only is that like wrenching on his nose, but his mouth is now covered and he's blind. Like, it's, if you really think about it, that he's in a really bad spot at that point. So, like, it's those little things again that just kind of make it. I was completely confused by the ending. I have no idea what happened. There was a win of some type, but then some cowboys came out. They restart the match, and then there was a figure 4 leg lock on Baba, but for some reason Destroyer was flailing and was declared the loser.
So it's a 2 out of 3 falls match. Baba won the first fall. Destroyer's sort of corner came in a little bit of like a mini melee between falls, and then Destroyer has the figure 4 on. The time limit draw happens, which again is didn't go the full 60. Like if you're kind of keeping track, I think it's somewhere over 50, but lower than 60 minutes. But it's called a time limit draw, and Destroyer was kind of, I think, selling that he's doing everything he can to get the submission before the time limit to tie it up, but he fails to do so. Baba wins 1-0.
Oh, I must have completely missed the first fall then.
Yeah, the first fall happens. It's actually pretty close to the end. They go quite a ways before they get to the first fall, and it's that Baba hits a kind of like monkey flip almost, like he's laying down and flips Destroyer over top of him, and then basically catches him for the press. So he gets the fall there.
Okay, that's the one I saw. Yeah, and in fact, I was laughing because it looked like Destroyer was complaining because he did in fact get his shoulders up at 2, and I was like, I don't know how the ref can justify that.
Yeah, it's a match that I think is like supposed to kind of be riddled with these like questions of whether or not Destroyer really lost the match, or should have lost the match. I don't think it was by design a definitive match. Obviously, you get the 1-0 finish in a 2 out of 3 time limit draw, which is just not something you kind of don't see that ever really. Maybe you get it
correctly.
What's that?
Then I didn't see it all correctly. That the way you just described it, it was 1 fall in a 2 out of 3 falls that ends in a time limit draw. Yeah.
So a little bit like kind of a, it sounds kind of convoluted, but sometimes I think about that, I'm like, that's actually like not that much booking of a finish compared to some modern wrestling that's there's all kinds of shenanigans that go into how a match comes to a close.
Ratings, I said 4.
So I give this the full 5. I give it a 5 because I think it is one of the best versions of a style, a genre that I like a lot, and that I think sort of gets down to the core of wrestling in a lot of ways. I would say that probably, your late 60s, 70s wrestling is not the first thing I turn to if I'm, looking for some comfort food wrestling. But I do go through phases where I really like it, and I'm kind of in a phase like that right now. I think maybe this actually kind of maybe started me wanting to look at more for a little bit, but I just love the story here. I think it's really intricate. I think they do things well. They work the crowd. This is, to me, calling it on the fly wrestling at some of its best. And they, wound up keeping my attention for 50 plus minutes with, a lot less in the toolbox than, your modern lengthy classics. So I really love this match. I think it's as Danny called it, a masterclass in psychology and heel face dynamic. And so for that, it gets full marks for me.
Like you said, it's a masterclass. I think that's the perfect word for it. It's not the type of match I think I would normally go to, or people like Danny would ever associate with me. But there's something about it. I actually really liked it. So I'll split the difference with you guys and go 4.5.
Oh,
Destroyer, nice. He really just had my attention, like you said. His antics were just so classic heel that it had my attention the whole time.
Yeah, I would say this is.
Expecting that from Greg. I was not expecting that from Greg.
Yeah, I would say this is one of the better Destroyer performances, but this is not like uncommon. So if you like Destroyer in this, I would recommend, there's a good bit of it on YouTube, and he's just genuinely, I think in the broader like wrestling fandom, one of the like unfortunately forgotten amazing wrestlers of a bygone era. He really, his psychology is great. He's a great heel. He's way more athletic than he looks. So this is certainly in a lot of ways his match.
Project with Mascaras from 72.
Yeah, and I'm not a huge Mascaras fan, but those are fun. Like Destroyer is fantastic. He's a like all-timer great wrestler.
And I like his cowboy henchmen because they were like, you could tell they were being the most stereotypical version of an American possible in Japan.
Yeah.
Now to a match I really love. Jushin Liger versus Naoki Sano. God, I love this thing.
Yeah.
Liger selling through the mask. This was a masterclass in selling too.
Oh yeah.
And how to sell under a hood.
Mm-hmm.
Because Liger's selling here is, my God, one of the best selling performances I've seen on a guy with a mask next to El Generico, maybe?
Mm-hmm. So start with Liger is wearing football pads in this match. So he's coming in with a shoulder injury. He's coming with a shoulder and arm injury, and obviously, like, that's what the entire match is built around, right? Sano goes right for it, and then you get what is commonly thought of as one of the best selling performances in wrestling from Liger, selling the arm. I think you do get like great body language selling, but he also just he sells it on offense. I love when people sell the body part that hurts while they're on the attack too. So it's not just when they're getting hurt; it's everything they do in the match. And Liger just this is just perfect selling. For people who are real sticklers for consistency in the way people sell, I think Liger hits this one out of the park. This is a great match, big match feel. But I think, to your point, that's the kind of highlight is that Sano is ruthless on the arm and Liger sells it really wonderfully.
And the other part about this match is these men want to murder each other.
Yes.
These men want to murder each other. They hate each other. They want to murder each other. And they want to do it to themselves to murder the other guy.
Mm-hmm.
Because there were times both Liger and Sano were ruthless with their own bodies to murder the other guy.
Yeah. My favorite part of that is, or favorite example of that rather, is there's a part like I think it's relatively early. I think they sort of tumble to the outside on a suplex that.
Oh yeah, it's the suplex to the outside.
Yeah, like it. I don't know if it just didn't work exactly how they wanted or what, but it kind of somewhat messily tumbled to the outside. But then like Liger kind of makes up for it by like doing a top rope dive to the floor, I believe, where he takes a drop kick on his way down. Like, so they kind of completely mask over this fact that there was this moment that didn't quite feel like it went exactly how it was supposed to. It didn't feel like a botch, quote unquote, or anything like that, but it didn't feel quite as fluid. And then they just like throw themselves into each other, and you're like, oh yeah, we're right back on track.
Greg, your thoughts?
All right. So you know me, I like all the stuff surrounding the match more than the match itself. So I'm just going to talk about that stuff. Basically, I love Liger. I think he's awesome. I love his costume. I love his mask. Danny actually came over to watch this match with me, and we're sitting here going through Liger theme songs because they're amazing. So it was just awesome. I was sitting here the whole time just wondering why Jushin Liger joined the Legion of Doom, and then wondering why he was allowed to wrestle with protective gear. So I was way too focused on the shoulder pads to actually pay attention to what was going on in the match. It was a good match, don't get me wrong, but I was very distracted.
Sure. Yeah, they definitely. It's like when something like that happens in a match and you have something like that, it stands out so much, right? Like, because it's you're not used to seeing it, and it can be really distracting of like to get to not focus on the fact that he has not just like protective gear but like a weapon, like he's got kind of a weapon on his body, but you know, it's wrestling.
The other thing was there was, I guess, another match around a year later in 90.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's all that I could find. Like, I was looking for some pictures for a video I'm doing, and I know Danny was having trouble even finding the match for us to watch. This was a good match. I don't know why it gets buried by that other match. I guess we're going to have to check that out at some point to see why that one's kind of more notorious.
90 match is freaking vicious.
Yeah. I think I prefer the 90 match by a little bit, but, you know, we'll get to star ratings in a second. You'll see I love this match as well. I think it's a genuine classic, but this match is an all-time selling performance. That one is maybe an all-time beating performance, and that will tend to get people's attention a little bit better. The last thing I want to say about this really quickly is I love that in this match they don't ever feel like they're headed to the next spot. They always feel like they're struggling to do something. So even when they're running the ropes, it feels like they're running the ropes with the intention of like getting speed to hurt the other person. And nothing feels cooperative here, but it also doesn't get to a point where things get clunky. So I think that these two
we'll talk about later.
Yeah, these two, you know, they're great dance partners. They're really excellent at that. So I love Liger and Sano as a pairing, and this is definitely one of their better ones.
4 3/4.
Same for me. 4 3/4 for me.
I couldn't pull the trigger on the 5. I really wanted to, but at the same time, it was like I couldn't in my right mind do it. But
yeah, I always kind of want both of this one and the 90 match to be 5 stars, and every time I watch it, I can't do it. I have them both at 4 3/4. With the 90 match being just a slight bit ahead of this one, but I agree, yeah. But 4 3/4 is also still puts it amongst probably the top 1% of matches I've ever watched.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, this one puts it on the top one echelon of 1% of matches. So this match is freaking great.
Greg, what do you got?
4 because I was dumb and got distracted.
That's fair.
It's still respectable rating.
Completely fair.
WWF, Triple H, Steve Austin, 2-man power trip versus Chris Benoit and Chris Jericho, the 2 Canadians. We don't condone what Chris Benoit did. We're just talking about his wrestling.
Of course.
So I did kind of look at some of the other segments from this episode just to refresh myself on where we're at in wrestling history. So this is the same year as the infamous WrestleMania X7. And this takes place roughly a month after that. The day after Judgment Day, where I believe Stone Cold beat Undertaker.
I believe so, yes.
Sounds right.
And then Triple H had just lost the Intercontinental title to somebody. And so, yeah, Triple H is just down to a tag belt, and Austin is still the champ. But this is also after he infamously turned heel, so he's in cahoots with McMahon.
I
But
love
yeah,
Austin.
the whole thing opens with him cutting a promo, and he gets interrupted by Jericho, which sets up this match.
Yeah.
And this is an infamous match.
Oh, absolutely.
Because this is one of the greatest TV matches of all time, but this is also a match where Hunter Hearst Helmsley tears his quadriceps.
Yes. So I guess I'll kind of talk about it for a second. I remember watching this match live and thinking at the time, and this was before I probably even knew what star ratings were. It's before I had kind of expanded out of being sort of a mainstream American wrestling fan, or not out of that, but expanded into other style genres, areas of wrestling. And I remember thinking immediately, this is one of the best matches I've ever seen. This was really great, and kind of logging that in my brain. And I still think that it's not a match that I think I would consider for my top 100, but it's still a match that I think holds up really well, and it's still a great, sort of up there with the best TV matches. I think, as Greg said, or Danny said, excuse me, it's just such Attitude Era awesomeness. I actually think that Attitude Era doesn't hold up quite as well on rewatch or a lot of it. It still has some great matches, but a lot of it's just overbooked.
This
2001
2001 Malaise era.
Yeah.
2001 era is probably some of the best stuff the Attitude Era ever had.
For sure.
Right after WrestleMania X7 to the WWE draft.
Yeah.
Probably some of the best stuff the company ever did.
Yeah. And I think this is a really great example of what the entire Attitude Era could have been in terms of producing the in-ring, the bell-to-bell stuff that might have held up a little bit better, regardless of all the other stuff that was going on around the Attitude Era that, that maybe some of the promos don't quite look the same in 2021. But regardless, this is great. The crowd is face melting hot for this. They are ready for this. And as soon as the wrestlers start coming out, you could just feel a different energy. And that's really sort of the best part of the Attitude Era to me. Triple H, man, say what you will about him. He's a divisive figure in wrestling, but nobody can deny that he is a tough son of a bitch. the fact that he tore his quads and then told Jericho to put him in the Lion Tamer anyway, I'll never not respect that. That's some real tough guy stuff right there. This is great dynamic. I think it's really hard to have 4 people in a match moving at this speed and this pace and this urgency and not see kind of seams in what they're doing and nitpick little things where the timing is off. And there's really almost none of that. The timing with everybody is spot on. The saves, the double teams, everything is good. And they kind of rush a little bit into this idea that Jericho and particularly Benoit just will not be denied, right? Like this is their moment. And Benoit takes that beating early on. They kind of rush a little bit into that for me, but it's also a TV match. It's, that's what they have to do. That's what they're given to work with. I don't think it really takes away from the match, but it might be part of why it kind of caps where it does to me. It's just really great, energetic, almost frenetic wrestling during parts of it that shows how good all 4 of these guys were at the time. And just how much skill it takes to do something like this with the timing, with the execution, while also building the drama to those near falls later on. It's top level stuff. And particularly if this is your cup of tea, like if this era of the WWE is kind of what you gravitate towards, this has to be one of your top matches.
And it is the era that I gravitate towards. That I always joke, I was the key demographic of the Attitude Era, especially in the late 90s part, maybe not the early 2000s, but I was, a middle school, suburban, white male. Like, I wanted nothing more than to just run around and tell everybody to suck it. Like, but I totally agree with you guys. This was like kind of the epitome of what that was. And what's interesting is I can watch this match now in my early 30s and I can like say, wow, if this was on TV right now, I probably wouldn't like it. It's overbooked. It's convoluted. It's just too much almost. But like at the time, it's such a sign of the times. Because this could only have happened then. Because just it all does kind of work. My only criticism is just, and I would never have noticed this as a middle school kid, I probably would have loved it actually, is way too much Earl Hebner. Just too much of, not even too much of him, but too much of him being oblivious. Like I'm sitting there screaming like, you dope. Like this isn't even a functioning adult at this point, let alone an official with authority. Like, but as a kid, I never would have made that kind of connection, like to incompetence. I would have just thought it was funny. So it worked in the time. It worked for the audience. It is everything the Attitude Era, like you said, could have and should have and was. I actually completely forgot watching this that this was the one where Triple H tore his quads. I thought he was just faking the injuries really well.
No, he was selling that.
Exact match where Triple H tore his quad, and it's one of the greatest matches of all time. It's hilarious. But I have to go on the heel Steve Austin is awesome rant for a second. I have to go on that rant. I don't know why he's so down on that run, man. Heel Austin is awesome. He plays that character so well. I know it didn't draw him money, but my God, he executed that character and that mystique about him being a heel really well.
Yeah, I think for me it's like I don't think it was quite the right time to pull the trigger. Like for me, I think the ace babyface sort of, or shades of gray babyface, Austin still had a little bit of meat on the bone.
Oh yeah, I totally understand.
And it might have, like, I'm actually okay with heel Austin as a character and as like an idea even, but I think it just got rushed a little bit. And again, maybe a little bit of a sign of the times where, or maybe a sign of what was to come in Vince's brain about sort of doing things quickly rather than maybe setting things up for a little bit longer, a longer term payoff. But I mean, regardless, it worked out really well. And WWF was at a point like nothing could go wrong. Like they weren't, like they could do no wrong at the time. And as long as Austin was on the TV, it was, people were going to tune in. So it worked out. The 2-man power trip stuff was still a lot of fun. And we got things like this match. And actually, I think some of Austin's best matches come as a heel. So we do get a lot of payoff from it.
Austin's best matches came as a in this era.
And I feel like Austin feels that way too, like exactly the way you just described it. It's not that he's down on the character or anything. It's that he regrets the timing. He thought, yeah. I think one of his quotes is actually that he could have milked more out of the babyface side.
Yeah, I haven't heard him talk about it in ages. I need to listen to his podcast again more, but because I always liked it. But yeah, that sounds right based on remembering kind of him talking a little bit about it from years ago.
Right. 4.5.
I have the same 4.5.
4 3/4. This, like I said, this was my era. This was my style of match. Very nostalgic. It was weird seeing Benoit. Again, I watched the rest of the episode, so it was weird seeing, like, there was a little part where the Chris's were talking backstage, hyping each other up, and they're like, yeah, man, we came up in Canada together through the Stu Hart dungeon. Like, let's do this for each other in Canada. And I was just like, oh.
You still feel like you. Yeah, you still feel like
yeah. It's still a little bit cringy when you think of it. And then, of course, to see him hit the diving headbutt in the match, it was just like, oh, man. This is hard. But the, like I said, the crowd, the booking, the characters, everything about it was peak Attitude Era. So yeah, 4 3/4. I'm not gonna go full 5-star, but
yeah, I think Benoit matches are generally draw that same sentiment out of me. You know, I don't want to harp too much on like the politics of watching his matches. People have been doing that for years, and it's really probably not that interesting to anybody. But it definitely, it's impossible for me to watch it completely void of understanding what happened, and particularly how he treats his body in his matches. The diving headbutts and the reckless abandon. But at the same time, it's hard to deny how impressive he was at the moment and how he shaped so much of what was going on in wrestling at that time.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree. It's hard to say this happened, but at the same time, it's hard to deny his impact.
Yeah.
Shield, Wyatt family. Rest in peace, John Huber, first off. Brody Lee, Luke Harper.
Real quick on
that. Go ahead.
I haven't seen the Dynamite tribute episode. Go watch it. It's amazing. That is one of the best 2 hours of wrestling TV I've ever seen, let alone a tribute to anybody. It was beautiful. All obviously thoughts and prayers go to the Huber family. But yeah, that episode was just class.
I totally agree with that. I can't think of a tribute episode that I think is quite as good at being a tribute episode. And I think part of it is that Dynamite did a really good job of just sort of abandoning for the most part, abandoning the idea that the episode was like canonical, that it was part of the show, but rather they just sort of completely committed to like everything on this show is a tribute. And that's in some ways a luxury of being a wrestling company in 2020, 2021. But I think it allowed them to kind of just have a fun wrestling show that never lost sight of sort of why they were doing what they were doing. And it was a roller coaster of emotions. Absolutely. As I was messaging my friend the entire time, I was like, I'm not crying, you're crying. And it was really well done. I totally agree. People should go watch it. And in turn, people should also go watch Luke Harper matches, Luke Harper / Brody Lee matches in general, because he was awesome.
Yes, he was. We're talking about one today. Shield, Wyatt family. Oh my God, this was awesome. This was just all six men in this match are awesome.
Yeah.
Crowd is super hot. When was the last time a WWE crowd was this hot?
It's tough to say.
My God. They were giving the Joe Kobashi treatment to these two factions, and it was freaking glorious. Shield's cohesion early. Harper's dropkick was nuts. Love the frantic energy. I love how both teams cut off the ring. Frantic pacing, love it. I love all the near falls. Didn't feel like a slog. Love the double choke slam near the end. Superman punch, and I love the quick finish too. So those were my thoughts on the match.
This was about 2 years before I got back into wrestling, and I don't think I've ever actually seen the full entrances for either group, like as a full group. So yeah, to see them back to back and the crowd reactions, like you said, was just so cool, especially after watching pandemic wrestling for the past almost.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think I love this match for a bunch of reasons. I don't know that the WWE could possibly produce the kind of hype that they had for these two factions meeting one another again if they tried. They just happened to have these two groups that were white hot at exactly the same time, and the ability to bring them together. And I like that they didn't do it in the actual chamber. I thought that was some good restraint on their part. They could have easily contrived a way to do this in the chamber, and I like that they didn't. But
yeah, there was a cage match at some point, right?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay.
But this like sort of first meeting between the two it just felt so special, and I remember it feeling special at the time. I was into WWE, but I wasn't following as closely as I have in other time periods. But this was definitely something that drew my attention and made me really want to invest and get interested. And the other thing I think that is really impressive is how perfectly each person is used in the match. It plays to each person's strengths and weaknesses so well. So, like, look, I love Roman Reigns. I think he is an incredible wrestler. But in 2014, he was not ready to spend as much time in a ring in a multi-person match as Luke Harper was, or Dean Ambrose was, or Seth Rollins was. those were more seasoned wrestlers who spent, time on the indies and had a lot more experience doing these kinds of things and kind of being ring generals. And so even though Roman Reigns has all the charisma in the world and is so clearly a future superstar, I don't think that, even though, the fans and Vince might have had different ideas about when that should have come. I don't think many people really genuinely in their hearts believe that Roman Reigns was bad at wrestling. And I think he's used so perfectly here. I mean, his presence on the outside is as much a part of the action as what's going on in the ring for the most part. And then leaving him in the ring with all three Wyatt members at the end was fantastic. Roman Reigns looks like a monster. And even though the Shield loses, it's just perfect. It's absolutely wonderful agenting. Whoever put this match together deserves a medal. And I suspect that many of the people involved, particularly I suspect Luke Harper was involved in helping put this match together. I've heard that that's like a knack that he had, and that he often was involved in the kind of construction of how a match would go. So I would suspect that was part of, he had a hand in that as well. But this is just great use of the tools you have, and everybody played their part here. Everybody brought a different kind of ethos to the match and a different character to the match, and it ends up being this kind of classic, this really just wonderful bit of wrestling, this 6-man tag that I'm not really sure the WWE could do again if they tried. And maybe it's because I don't know that they were thinking in that way at the time. This feels like the wrestlers kind of organically emerging and as the characters that they were, as the over characters that they were to produce this.
Yeah,
And
organic.
Isn't that just always the way with WWE? Like they the only time they have good storylines is when they backwards into it. Like
yeah, it's definitely like my biggest. It's not even a complaint. It just doesn't it's just not my style. Like when things feel too polished and put together, I'm not. It loses a little bit of its appeal to me, and this kind of felt like something that was just undeniable. Like, and if they did see this coming years in advance and thought this through in a very traditional WWE kind of way, then good on them, and I have been fooled. But it didn't feel quite like everything else, most of what else was going on at the company the surrounding time.
Did you hear basically everything you just said is what I want to say, but
sorry.
Great. So we totally agree. Did you hear, though, to your point about Roman, when he does get tagged in at one point, Michael Cole even says, "There's the leader of the Shield." Mm-hmm. And what is it? Lawler next to him goes, "I thought Ambrose was the leader." And they have a little back and forth that's so interesting, because whereas with the Wyatts, Bray is clearly in charge. He's the leader. He's this kind of cult leader. The Shield always seemed to be jockeying for position. And what was really amazing to me is I feel like you can come into this match, watch the video package right beforehand, mm-hmm. as a complete non-wrestling fan, or at least non-WWE fan, not knowing anything about this. You could watch that video package and then watch this match, and you 100% get every single character here. Every motivation. You understand why they're fighting.
Yes.
It all makes sense. That is just what WWE cannot do to this day. And I don't even think they could do it then. I think the only time they put it on TV is when it was an accident, when they just happened upon it. Because like you said, everybody is used so perfectly. if Luke Harper did, it makes sense that Luke Harper did, age in this match because he shines so beautifully in his limited role. He gets all his moves off, the big sidewalk slam, the big boot. He plays that monster role perfectly. And then, but at the end, like you said, you can tell Roman's not quite ready, but he is a monster. Kind of like what they did with Braun Strowman a couple years ago. Like, have him be a world beater, but don't put a belt on him or anything. So to have Dean be taken out into the crowd, to have Seth be taken out through an announce table and leave Roman to face the whole family and still hold his own was genius booking. Like, that's, like you said, it makes Roman look like an absolute monster, and I just loved everything about this. I loved the storytelling. I loved how it was so continuous. It was great. It was just great all around.
Yeah, and we maybe are like, obviously we're looking at Luke Harper, otherwise known as Brody Lee, a little bit more in this because of the very reason that we brought it up, right? The very reason that we bring it into this particular episode. But I do think you see how, like, who he was as a wrestler, where he's never really the center of attention. But everybody around him kind of always looks better. Everybody who finds themselves in his sphere, and I think this is really true of his career pretty broadly. I was relatively familiar with a lot of his work on the independents. Just about anybody who ends up in Brody Lee's sphere looks better for it and feels like a bigger deal for it, even if you don't know who Brody Lee is, even if you don't know who Luke Harper is. He's somebody who's very much for the good of the team and very much for the good of the product. And I think he fills that role in the Wyatt family pretty well. The Wyatt family, I think he carried a lot of what the Wyatt family did, especially in hindsight when we look back at it and we look back at sort of where everybody else has gone, what they've done since. I think he was probably was carrying a little bit more weight than we realized. But yeah, in this match, he's fantastic, and I think to the point about Ambrose and Reigns I think that's a really interesting point. I did not catch that, but it's why I really don't like Michael Cole very much is I think Michael Cole beats you over the head with the story, and that bothers me. I don't like that much exposition, and again, kind of say what you will about Jerry Lawler. But I think he gets the narrative beats and sort of the nuances of them. And I think selling Ambrose as the leader, because I think he was either had a singles title or was going for a singles title. He had been the U.S. title. So like early in the Shield, he was the singles guy, and Reigns and Rollins were the tag team. And so I think selling that was I think part of the broader plan for the Shield. So that, whether that was planned or not, I have no idea. I have no idea what Vince was yelling in their ear. I have no idea how they were thinking of it, but how King called that makes more sense to me and is more appealing to me as a fan of where the Shield was at this particular time than how Cole called it, if that makes sense.
Well, when I came back into wrestling, it was right at the tail end of Seth and the Authority. Like right kind of as he was leaving the, Triple H's sphere.
Right.
And with that context, I kind of always saw Seth as almost the biggest guy because he was, the champ at the time and all this stuff. He had just been Money in the Bank guy. So I'm looking at Seth as kind of the biggest name of the three. And so I look back at this point and the way they're playing his character, he is kind of the least of the three, which is just so interesting because even when they kind of brought it back, was a year or two ago, just for that mini reunion, Seth was kind of playing the leader. So to go back to this match and see, like you're saying, Dean is kind of portrayed as the leader at that point, is really interesting. And to see him take that reign as the leader was also interesting to see, because he like there was a promo earlier, and he was the main mic guy on the on that promo. So he was definitely the leader.
I think the turning point was Rumble 2015 when, which actually the match we're not going to was from that event. It wasn't the actual Rumble, but it was the WWE Championship match. But the Rumble 2015 where Roman won the Rumble, and Philly booed Reigns out of the building with The Rock there.
Yeah, I think to the point brought up about the leaders is, in hindsight, I really kind of believe that the WWE actually did a great job of, if we take out all of the narratives, did a good job of really selling them as three equals. As there is no leader, they are they are a group of three equals that have different personalities, that have different things they bring to the table. And I almost wonder if early on, who you if you're watching kind of live as the Shield emerge, who you thought the leader was based on who you liked the most. So I liked Ambrose the most. That was my favorite from the get-go, and I was familiar with Rollins from his work in Ring of Honor, but I didn't know anything really about Reigns. And at the beginning, I liked Ambrose the most. I liked Reigns a good bit. I liked Rollins a good bit, excuse me. I liked Reigns, but I thought Reigns had a big future rather than really wanting to see him much right now. And I almost wonder, just depending on who you liked the most, who you were gravitating towards in terms of their style, would sort of dictate who you thought the leader was. And then obviously fans create their own narratives, and when you drop in, what you see is going to determine a lot of that. So a lot of this might actually be, to their credit, really great booking from the WWE that allowed fans to fill in the blanks, if that makes sense. But it's all speculation. I mean, regardless, the Shield was an immensely successful faction that now we are enjoying the fruits of that labor.
I think you just made my point a little more eloquently. What I was trying to say about the confusion over who the leader is, is that exactly what you just said. WWE is almost letting you pick your favorite.
Gotcha. I see.
Equals. There was a confusion because you couldn't tell who the leader was. These guys are equals. And I'm actually the same as you. When I got back into it, I looked and I could see the push, and I could understand why Rollins and Reigns were big deal title contenders, but I like Dean the best too.
Yeah. And honestly, I think Reigns probably was more ready at the time that he got his main event push, but he ran into the juggernaut that was Bryan. Bryan was just the most over person in wrestling since Austin. He was transcending wrestling. People at baseball stadiums were doing the yes chant, right? It was just bad timing for him ultimately. And that's kind of unfortunate. I'm the biggest Bryan mark in the world. He's my favorite wrestler ever. But, they instead of shifting gears, I think just tried to force it. And I think that's correct.
Because at that Rumble, when Bryan got eliminated, that's when it all went to crap, because we were booing every guy that came out after that.
Yeah, and I'm generally for not the shut up and enjoy the product, because I think we don't live in a world where fandom works that way anymore. But I am sort of the look, if I don't like it, I don't have to watch it. There's plenty of wrestling. I'm not going to spend too much time complaining about it. But man, they brought that on themselves. Like, they were in Philly. They should have known better. That they deserved every boo they got that night, because that was a bad decision.
Right. Ryan got eliminated by Bray Wyatt of all people, and then yeah, but we're not talking about that match. We're talking Rumble 2015. Same event. John Cena, Brock Lesnar, Seth Rollins. Before we go, ratings on Shield Wyatt family 4 3/4.
I have it 4.5. Just at the upper end of 4.5 for me.
I went 5. This was amazing.
Nice.
Like I said, I feel like you can go in even as a non-wrestling fan knowing nothing about this, and you'll instantly understand everything. They tell such a beautiful story of, like, yeah, this what I'm realizing is kind of like a boy band where you get to pick your favorite of future superstars taking on this monster cult. It was just great. Fantastic. 5 stars for me.
Nice. I will say this. I tend to kind of go through phases where I like particular styles, or eras of wrestling. And if I ever get really nostalgic for like mid 2010s, like TV American wrestling, this could jump right up, because this is definitely like the kind of match that I will be gravitating to. And I think it already has aged well, and it's going to continue to age really well.
Yeah, it's going to age well. Yeah. Speaking of matches that don't age well, I'm just saying. This match does not age well, in my opinion. Cena Lesnar. And I was there live.
Yeah.
Loved this match live. I did like this match live. It was an interesting pick.
Hey, Danny, I just want to brag real quick. You said you were at this event. I got to go to the 2018 Royal Rumble in Philly. And
I was there the night before.
Oh, and we actually got to see a good Royal Rumble in Philly where we didn't boo everything.
Hey, I was there the night before where Almas and Gargano had a 5-star match.
So was I. Nice. So we both got to see the 5-star.
Yeah. Yep. So, but I got to see this match, which was, I still think is very good, but the near falls are not as believable as you once thought they were. When you first watched it, and the only near falls that were believable were the F5s, curb stomps, and AAs.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a big problem in this match, because you didn't think Cena's Michinoku driver was going to finish it. You didn't think a bunch of stuff like the 5-knuckle shuffle or the suplexes were going to finish it. And I thought maybe the Phoenix Splash was going to finish it. No, it didn't finish it. But still, I thought the pacing was very well. I thought Lesnar looked like a powerhouse here. I thought Rollins trying to be the sneaky high flyer really contrasted well with the power of Cena and Lesnar. The power of both of them. And I thought after the frog splash spot through the announce table, the pacing really halted. And J&J Security halted the momentum too.
Greg, why don't you go first on this one, since I took all your points on the last match?
Oh, yeah, no problem. I feel like this match epitomized all the criticisms of modern wrestling. I thought it was overbooked. I think the biggest thing is that, and I think, Dan, you were alluding to this, they just finisher spammed.
Yeah, finisher spammed.
what's really fascinating was watching this in the same kind of what I'll call a card as that Baba match, where you didn't see anything remotely resembling a finisher. Here, that is literally all they did was finishers upon finishers, and especially Brock Lesnar. Back in college, I had this amazing sociology professor, and he actually talked about pro wrestling in a lecture one time, and he encouraged us. He said, "I'm not a wrestling fan at all. I don't watch it, but if it ever comes here to Penn State, which it did, go see a WWF show at least once in your life." He's like, "It is fascinating. It's incredible live." He told everybody go do it. And one of his points was, these guys are superheroes. They'll take a move that should kill a man, and then they'll just stand right back up 5 seconds later. And I can see that criticism from a non-wrestling fan, especially if they watch this match. Like, I can see why people love it if this is your style, but finisher spamming is not my style. So that really took me out of it. Especially when you have Heyman screaming off camera at the end, right? And he's calling for medical attention. They bring out this stretcher, and out of nowhere, Brock is up and climbing the ropes. Like, come on. So,
like the stretcher spot is the most overdone spot in WWE.
Yeah. I get what they were trying to do. Putting him through a table and making him look unbeatable and all this stuff, but yeah, and it's everything. It's from the entrance of booing Cena, the overly pushed guy that the fans don't want pushed, all the way through to the finish where the monster retains his belt after taking 50 of everybody's finishers, including 2 Money in the Bank shots to the head, an interference from the other guy's goons, and he still conquers all. Like I said, it's the epitome of everything wrong with the modern WWE product. So,
so I agree with all of that, and Craig got to get me back and take a good bit of what I was going to say. So I co-sign all of that. I came in expecting to be the low guy on this, and I think I might be the high guy on it, which is weird. So I agree. This is like bad version of finisher spamming on the whole, but I'll also make an argument that it kind of worked.
Yeah, it worked. It did work, and I think it worked in a way where the frantic pacing helped and the urgency helped.
Yeah. So I'll kind of give this some compliments and then immediately some criticisms. The reason I say it worked is this was part of a kind of reclamation of Brock Lesnar to sort of continue off of his, he'd broken the streak by this point. They were really building him up as the unbeatable monster. And the purpose of that was so that Reigns could beat him at WrestleMania. And I will actually say that I think that even though everybody booed Reigns, right? Everybody was mad about it. And everybody, people were not having it. And I think that was it the Fastlane that year where Bryan and Reigns had a match for the number 1 contender spot, and Reigns won. So they were doing what they could to kind of get to circumvent the demands of the fans this year because they'd given in to them earlier. And I think what ends up happening is that in the middle of the Reigns Brock match at Mania that year, it clicked. Like, I actually think it worked. And I think if you watch that match back, like people love that match. And it's because Brock was absolutely unbeatable to that point. Brock was the biggest, baddest monster the WWE had ever created. And he was bludgeoning Reigns during the match. Now then they throw the curveball and Rollins comes in and cashes in. And I think they again set Reigns back. But this doesn't need to be a story about how Reigns keeps getting set back. But rather, that's possible because they do stuff like this where they go way over the top to build Brock Lesnar up as an unbeatable monster. Now, that all said, I do think it sort of gets a little eye-rolly in this match. And really, the bigger issue to me is that when Brock's not in this match, it's kind of boring. And that's unfortunate because I actually think John Cena and Seth Rollins are both good wrestlers. I don't think that they were necessarily having a bad match with each other. I just think that when you juxtapose it to everything else in the match, it doesn't make sense. Brock Lesnar's out. They should be frantically trying to finish the other one, not kind of casually having a match. And they kind of casually had a match for like 5-10 minutes. Until Brock was ready to come back in. And that really took me out of what was otherwise, I think, kind of a pitch perfect triple threat. They used, yes, there was finisher spam, but if I remember correctly, most of the kickouts that were coming from Cena or Rollins were actually the other person breaking it up, or Brock breaking it up. It wasn't Brock was the one that was kicking out of finishers, whereas Rollins and Cena, I believe, were for the most part surviving because there was another person involved and they were making saves. So I could forgive a little bit of that stuff because
that's my notes do reflect.
Go ahead. What was that?
Just my notes do reflect that it was almost always a breakup. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I can forgive a little bit of that, but it does kind of take away from the drama when you see so many finishers and no finish. Then it makes it pretty clear that you're not going to get a finish on like a roll up, or you're not going to get a finish on a Michinoku driver or something like that. So I get that criticism. I buy it. I do think as far as that goes, this built it in a logical kind of way. It built in the style of the time, the way the WWE had kind of leaned into that main event style that they sometimes will ebb and flow towards over time. So it's good and bad, right? I guess this is my long way of saying it. There's good and bad here. I love, this was a time when Brock was just, murdering people, and I love Brock murdering people. So I loved when Brock was involved in the match. When Brock wasn't, it dropped off a cliff. Just in terms of the logic of why and how people were doing what they were doing, I think Rollins and Cena should have both been. They should have kept up that finisher spam and trying to desperately finish while Brock was out. I don't think this idea that they take for granted that Brock is going to be stretchered away, that doesn't make any sense to me. Everybody knew Brock was coming back in. I think, that's kind of my impression at the time and in hindsight. So
yeah, you knew Brock was getting up.
So I still like it, but I think I'm also with you on that. Like, this is a live match. This is a match that was like really exciting in the moment, and maybe a little bit like in rewatch, it doesn't hold up as like you could watch this in a vacuum comfort food kind of match.
It's funny you should say about the the times when Brock was down and it was just Cena and Rollins, because not only did Cena get horribly booed when he came out, like in his entrance, this is like peak Cena hate.
Yeah.
But even when he goes to do the 5 moves of doom, I think he doesn't even
2006 is peak Cena hate. 2006.
But like, he doesn't even get through the second shoulder tackle, and the crowd is letting him have it. No, we don't want to see this. Screw your 5 moves. And I think Rollins or J&J Security, somebody breaks up the first attempt,
and he has to go for the 5-knuckle shuffle a second time. And the crowd is just like, oh, no, you didn't. Like, so the Cena hate is another reason why maybe those moments felt so off, because the crowd wasn't giving him anything. And that's, to bring it all the way back to the current product, that's something that Cena finally acknowledged in the Firefly Funhouse match. Was, man, I leaned into that instead of, or I guess I went against it instead of leaning into it, because he should have just turned heel when they're booing him. And instead he's like almost mocking the crowd. He's smirking while he's doing the 5 moves. He's like, yeah, I know you're booing me. I don't care. I'm going to do this. And that leaning into that, I think, was another reason that those moments felt so off.
I kind of think he is accepted it by this point. Like, it's Philly. Philly is almost like another character in this match, right? Like this whole show, right? Like the Philly crowd they're
JBL calls them unique.
Yeah, right. Like, and I think that Cena had by this point kind of accepted. I agree. Like, there are parts of me that wish he turned heel, but maybe in hindsight, it was better that he remained this prototype of WWE, this caricature of a caricature that WWE fans, and there are actually, like, they often get drowned out during this period, but there are people who are like diehard Cena fans still. And then you have the anti-Cena fans, and the WWE did a pretty good job of actually pitting those groups against one another rather than going heel face, right? So like the Punk Cena feud is amazing because it plays on a different kind of investment in wrestling than good guy, bad guy. It plays on the two different understandings of what wrestling should be. And I think they did that with the little miniature Bryan Cena angle leading into their match. This is what wrestling should be. And I actually think ultimately that benefited Cena and allowed Cena to have more great matches in the latter part of his career. But it also, I think to your point, Greg, probably takes a little bit away from this match because nobody wants Cena to win. Like, there's no excitement around a Cena near fall in this match. And in fact, there's almost like because they want Brock to win so bad, there's almost like an apathy to Rollins in some ways. And I think that takes a lot out of that middle section that is the thing that brings this down to me, that kind of caps this at a really, really good triple threat match and not a great match or an elite match, which is what it is in certain sections.
It's interesting you say that because I just recently watched a top 10 Royal Rumble matches of all time list, and the narrator or presenter had 2018 Royal Rumble as the number 1. And the reason he did is because the ending sequence with Roman and Shinsuke had the crowd terrified that Vince was going to let Roman win this Rumble. And every near fall or near elimination that Roman does, the crowd is petrified, like, no, he's going to do it. No. Mm-hmm. And I feel like you have the same feeling here with those Cena falls. Every time Cena comes close to winning, the crowd's like, oh, geez, no, not again.
Yeah.
And it's that tension that, you're right, it does kind of work in a way.
Yeah. Well, and I said that people
But you don't want that tension of apathy every time.
Right. Well, to Greg's part really quick before I forget, I said that like there was no energy around Cena's falls. What I actually meant was that there was like a real negative energy, right? Like there was a sense of dread around Cena falls where there was the apathy to Rollins falls, as I think Danny was just mentioning. But like, that is actually, I think, what the WWE did great during this period. They maybe don't get enough credit for leaning into this different way that fans were invested as this new, not new, but a different kind of fandom had really long emerged, but is really becoming mainstream at the time. I remember being at WrestleMania 30, and again, I'm the biggest Bryan marker. Like, he's been probably my favorite wrestler since 2002, when he first started. I think he's absolutely fantastic. And I was at that WrestleMania. I knew well and good he was going to beat Triple H. Like all logic told me that there's no way Triple H was going to beat Bryan and go to the main event. That would tank the entire show. I was on the edge of my seat the entire match, because I also had that feeling of, oh no, that they're going to actually have Triple H go over Daniel Bryan. And it's that, like, this clashing of wrestling worlds that happened during this period of WWE that is really unique. And I think they made the most of Cena during that period, in hindsight.
To be fair, that feeling requires the death of kayfabe, because
absolutely
you need fans to know this is all a work inherently, and they're no longer guessing what's actually going to happen for competition's sake. They're guessing what this mad 80-year-old in Connecticut is going to put on their television screen.
Yeah.
And it's just as unpredictable as real life. So, like, you get just as invested in trying to make it all make sense in your head.
Yeah. I think fans too often get hung up on, this is how wrestling used to be, right? Like, well, where's the good guys and the bad guys? Where's the heels and the faces? Like, when FTR and the Young Bucks had their match, I saw people just, like, dismissing the match because they didn't know who the faces were, right? I was like, I don't know, like, yeah, it would be great to have a clear dynamic and invest in that way, but I don't really think that's how wrestling works anymore, because wrestling works on your emotional investments, and wrestling works on creating shades of gray and stakes that you don't know how things are going to go. So look, kayfabe had to die, right? Like, it was going to happen. It was going to happen one way or another. So if it happens, hats off to the WWE during this time period for finding a different way to play off of the emotional investment of the audience. And I think that's what this match benefits from, in parts of it, right? When it's at its hottest, that's what it benefits from. It also is why it's also one of its sort of biggest drawbacks is when Brock's not in there, they lose a lot of that. It's what made, as I said, Cena versus Punk great. It's what made Cena versus Bryan a really weirdly hot feud. It's what made Bryan's entire climb to the title maybe the hottest thing the WWE's done since the Attitude Era, just in terms of sheer interest. I'm sorry, what did you say, Danny?
It's what made Kofi Kingston's thing great.
Yeah, it's what made Kofi Kingston's thing great. Like, so wrestlers are always trying to use different platforms and different ways to make you question where the lines are, to make you question, is there really a plot to keep down these independent wrestlers? To make you question, I think, like, I don't get too far into it, but like, you see a lot of people playing with Twitter in that way, right? Like, MJF is fantastic.
WWE didn't really cease and desist them for the Too Sweet thing.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, there's that's what wrestlers are doing. They're trying to trick you into believing that something is real. They know, like, now we all know, we're all in on the work, right? We're all in on the fact that the finish is going to be predetermined, but they want you to guess and to not know things. And I think that's a not lost. It's talked about, but it's really not recognized enough how brilliant it was for the WWE to lean into that. And I think they should have done it more. I absolutely think CM Punk should have main evented a WrestleMania on that premise. I think they could have built a white hot WrestleMania main event on that very premise. But they didn't, right? But they built lots of other great stuff, and that is, I think, to understand why this match is both simultaneously really, really good, but also why it loses some of its luster in places, at least for me, and I think for you two as well, based on what you're saying. You have to understand that dynamic is kind of my impression of things.
Yeah,
and I'm such a big AEW mark right now over WWE, even though I watch both, is because they lean into the fact that, hey, look, kayfabe is dead, okay? The hidden cameras are dead. All this stuff, you know, to use an analogy from another medium, in DC, the campy good guy versus bad guy Batman is gone. We live in the Dark Knight times, where Bane makes great points and Batman's kind of a douche sometimes. Like, it's not as cut and dry as it used to be, and you have to lean into that and find other dynamics that are pitted against each other. Like you said, old school versus new school with the Bucks and FTR. There's other things going on, and AEW leans into that. They're doing it right now with the Invasion.
Yeah.
You can't tell if this are Kenny and Don really best friend kind of mentor-mentee relationship in real life, and who's actually friends, and they're on Twitter. It seems like they are, but they're yelling at each other, and this is happening, and it makes you guess again. Like, hey, we know you're not actually good and bad guys, so we still want to get worked.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like,
yeah, work me.
Yeah,
work me.
Absolutely.
That's what I want as a wrestling fan. And wrestling fans get so offended if they're worked now. And I'm like, I want to be worked, people!
Yeah, I'm also a big AEW mark for the exact same reasons. I want to be in the dark, right? I want to be guessing and be wrong, right? So I don't know how many times I'll look at an AEW storyline and I'm like, I think it's going to go this way. I'm so embarrassingly wrong all of the time, but it's fine because what they're doing is better. Like, what they're giving me is even better than that. So they oftentimes end in the same place that I think they're going to end, but they get there through side roads and back roads, and then they twist and turn, and they ask me to invest in different ways. And I think that's what modern wrestling is. And that's why one of the reasons I like AEW. I get that it's not everybody's cup of tea. I get that some people are not as invested as I am in it, but I won't miss a Dynamite, period. Like, that's, I even watch Dark sometimes, because like you said, they lean into the fact that kayfabe is dead. I watch Dark because I like to listen to Excalibur and Taz banter, right? Like, because they get to have
commentary in wrestling, period. They are the best commentary team in wrestling right now, period.
Absolutely.
I hear anything otherwise. I watch every episode of Dark for those two.
Yeah, they're fantastic because they're having fun being a commentary duo. We know that they're friends in real life, or they have a working relationship. We know that they joke about work, they joke about building guys, they joke about storylines, and it's fun. And wrestling should be fun, right? And AEW has embraced on television a really different dynamic to what is real and what is worked in wrestling, that I think just resonates with some fans differently, and other fans are maybe either A, not interested, or B, uncomfortable with that. Not like in a, like, they're offended, but like, it just doesn't resonate. It makes them sort of look down on the product because it's not what they're used to. It's not what they think wrestling should look like, and that's fine. But I think AEW in the long term is doing what's best for them and embracing a very different way of thinking about working fans, because I have tons of questions about, like, the future of AEW. I have tons of questions about people like Cody Rhodes, and I think ultimately it's going to be worked into the show in a way that's really entertaining to me. because that company's built a lot of faith around these exact issues that we've been kind of fleshing out for a little bit.
It's all about the faith, like you just said. I used to do WWE reviews for Raw and SmackDown on my YouTube channel. I stopped because I found myself fantasy booking because I hated what they were giving me.
Yep.
Whereas now I'm doing Dynamite reviews and I'm just reviewing what's there because there's no reason for me to even attempt to fantasy book their perfection. They're so much better at it than me. So, whereas I was pretty confident I was coming up with much better things than WWE was.
Yeah, it's, they're two kind of different ways of doing wrestling shows, and ultimately the fans are the winners, right? Like, we're all winners because there's more good wrestling out right now, even in a pandemic, than we really can deal with, than any sane person can deal with. And that's the good thing. But I do think that those shifts in how wrestling fans look at wrestling and how they can be worked is noteworthy. And I'm glad we looked at so many kind of modernish matches today, because I think it sparked a pretty interesting conversation in that.
Yeah, it sparked a really interesting conversation, and I feel like I learned a lot about like the postmodernist way of thinking when it comes to wrestling. We sort of had like a postmodernist discussion about like how wrestling is and how it sort of shifted from like this heel face dynamic to a sort of Bane-ish Batman versus Joker sort of dynamic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's just more ways to do it, right? I mean, there's still good guys and bad guys. We still love heroes like Jon Moxley, right? We still love our good guys, and we like our bad guys, but there's more ways to build those things and more avenues for appealing to the audience. It's just fascinating. It's an interesting time.
Yes. So what would you rate that match? We got far off in that discussion.
Yeah, we did. I gave it 4.25. I still think it's a very good match. It has 5-star elements to it. It just kind of averages out to 4.25 to me.
I rated it the same. I agree with you, Matt. It has some 5-star elements, but the elements I couldn't overlook: the finisher spamming, the just all the postmodernist stuff about it. I couldn't overlook it. Greg?
In the immediate aftermath, like immediately following the match, I probably would have given it 4 stars. But the more I reflected on it, I think I'm even going to drop it down to 3.5.
Okay.
The finisher spamming really got to me, which is funny because that's what AEW is accused of. But yeah, just there was so much that I didn't like, and especially in retrospect reminded me of my issues with the current WWE product, that it drug that down. 3.5 is still a good match, but definitely my least favorite of this card.
Yeah, this was my least favorite. My favorite was Jushin Liger, Naoki, Sano.
Yeah, also my least favorite, and obviously my favorite was Baba Destroyer.
And Greg's favorite was obviously Triple H,
Wyatt.
Austin versus Benoit and Jericho.
He gave 5 to Wyatt Shield.
Yeah, I like the Wyatts in the Shield. Yeah.
Oh, even better. Oh yeah, you gave 5 to both of those. My God, my bad. So next time we're going Buried Alive. Not the 2003 version. Don't worry, we're not going that insane. We're going to the 1996 version between Undertaker and Mankind. Then we have a barn burner on our hands from All Japan 1982. Terry and Dory Funk Jr. versus Stan Hansen and Bruiser Brody. Then we have Bryan Danielson versus Low-Key from JAPW 6/7/2002. And then we have Onita-san versus Tarzan Goto as Sushi Onita making his first appearance on Great Match Generator.
Excellent. I'm going to go ahead and preview that Danielson Low-Key match is one of my absolute favorite matches in the history of wrestling. It is, if you've been sleeping on that rivalry period or just haven't seen this match because it's from a lesser known indie, get on it. It is so good.
Greg, you have any thoughts on what you're looking forward to for next week?
I don't think I'm familiar with any of this.
What you were familiar with one of the wrestlers, Bryan Danielson, aka Daniel Bryan.
Well, yeah, no, I'm looking forward to seeing his early indie work. What year was the Buried Alive though that we're looking at?
1996.
96. Okay, I may be match. Yeah.
Undertaker Mankind. It was from In Your House Buried Alive. I believe the show was. So, plug. I said plug.
Oh, I'll go then. So you can find me on Twitter at MarkoutMountain. As always, come over, check out the Greatest Match Ever forum at gweprojects.freeforum.net. That's it for me.
And you can catch me over on Twitter at PSU Optimus. But mostly I'm doing a lot of stuff over on YouTube. I kind of mentioned that earlier. I am doing a review of this podcast. So I put these matches into a card and I'm kind of reviewing it as if it was a TV show. And so you can check that over there. I also did my own Brody Lee tribute. So we talked about that a lot today. Definitely check that out. It's been getting some good feedback.
Nice.
Yeah, so YouTube is Wrestling Optimus, just like the Transformers character. So check that out, subscribe, like, do all that normal stuff.
Cool.
DJ D Kooks on Twitter. And following this episode will be a short 20-minute audio that me and Matt did with the 4 matches we did previous week.
Yeah, we had some recording trouble, so Danny and I just did a quick recap episode.
So that will be following this episode. On just stay on the episode, of course, and you guys get that as a bonus. Thank you for listening to Great Match Generator on Monco Radio and the Social Suplex Podcast Network. We love you guys, and have a wonderful week.
Take care.
Woohoo! Well, Great Match Generator. This is a mini pod to make up for the major pod we had last time. We had recording issues. I'm here with Matt.
Hey, how's it going?
Matt has become a de facto co-host. And we're going to go over the 4 matches that we would have gone through the last time we were going to record, but we did record the episode. And I still have the files on my thing. It's just, it would have been a pain in the ass to edit.
Yeah.
So, we're doing a make good here. The 4 matches are the Dangerous Alliance Squadron from 5/17/92 War Games Wrestle War. The Masahiro Chono Rick Rude G1 Final from 92. Not the Halloween Havoc one. I had to make that joke there. Dream Slam 92. We're doing a lot of 1992 here.
Yeah, I didn't even notice that last time, but here we are.
Manami Toshiyo Yamada versus Dynamite Kansai and Mayumi Ozaki from Dream Slam 2 92. 4/11/93 actually. It was a rematch from Dream Slam 92. So it ties into 1992. And then the Masahiro Toshiaki Kawada, not from 1992, but from 1995. 7/24/1995. A rematch from 6/9/94. It's 6/3/94.
Yeah.
So we normally go in order of date here. So we are going to go into Dangerous Alliance versus Sting Squadron, and this was just classic War Games in my opinion. Just the way it's presented and then the way the match turned out, it was just classic War Games. This is my favorite War Games. And then Paulie looks so confident coming into this match. Austin and Windham are working each other over. I just have notes based off of who comes in and commentary's great here. Sure. It's just a great match. What were your thoughts on it?
Absolutely. This is pretty easily my favorite War Games. I think it is about 95% perfection. It's, as you said, like, it just the look and feel of it. It's the gritty WCW era War Games. It doesn't have as much polish on it as, you know, your sort of, if we drew a comparison to say maybe the modern NXT version of War Games is a little bit more polished and refined and loses a little bit to me, just in terms of what War Games is. But this is also what I grew up with. This is somewhat nostalgic for me. The sides are just so evenly matched. There's so many big stars in this, and I think you mentioned Austin and Windham going at it early, and they really set a tone. I mean, they're busted open, they're bloody, and I think that they serve as kind of this foundation for the match that everybody gets to build on, and that is really key to why this match was great. The only reason that this match is not something that I give 5 stars to or include on my top 100 list. Again, the kind of origin of this project more broadly is that greatest match ever project. Just kind of in that context, the only reason this is not in that top 100 for me is there's just a little bit of kind of wandering around and being like a little bit of being lost at the very end of the match. I mean, not lost, but just not quite as urgent as so much of the rest of the match was, and it was from guys who were coming in at the end, so they didn't even have that kind of built-in exhaustion kind of reason for that. It's super nitpicky. This is still an absolutely elite match. It's nothing that I would have any criticisms for in any other context other than let's think about the absolute greatest matches ever, because this is really top end wrestling from this era, and one of my favorite gimmick matches, to be perfectly honest. And I'm pretty generally, I'm a little bit harder on big multi-mans like this because just so much can go wrong. There's so many more variables for there to be something off, something awkward, something where timing just isn't right or where people aren't on the same page. I find that multi-person matches tend to cap out at maybe the 4 3/4 or even 4.5 often. And this is really the top end of that. This is absolutely fantastic. It made my list the first time I did it. It fell off the second time, but it's still a absolutely phenomenal match. Should be canonical wrestling viewing for everybody.
Yeah, I agree. This match just flies by, in my opinion, and they just let moments breathe naturally, and I just feel like what takes it off for me was the end felt a little anticlimactic, but it was still fantastic.
Yeah, I think that point about it flying by is really a good one, because it's it's not a short match. I mean, everybody's got to come in these like sort of timed intervals, and it doesn't drag at all. It really is just pieced together so wonderfully. Like the plan that they had and the way they execute it it's just flawless for the most part. Again, 95% perfect to me, and 95% perfect will get you a long way.
Yeah. I rated it at 4 3/4.
Same.
Really fantastic. Masahiro, Chono, Rick Rude. 8/12/92. This came in at the 319th in the 2020 project. The last match came in at 101st.
Which match? I'm sorry, what'd you say?
Masahiro, Chono, Rick Rude came 319th as the last match. Dangerous Alliance beating Squadron just missed the top 100.
Gotcha. I didn't hear who you said just missed the top 100. Yeah, this Chono Rude match, I'll kind of kick off and kick it back to you, is I really, really like it. I can view it as an objectively good match and an accomplishment in terms of how they slowly pulled me into being really invested in the match, but it's just maybe not doesn't resonate with me quite as much. So what to some people might be a real all-time great is to me just sort of this objectively very, very good wrestling match. I think Chono is an awesome wrestler. I think here you definitely see he's a really good athlete. He is strong as an ox. He has great core strength, and I think he really uses that in some. What was that?
Really fiery too.
Yeah, really fiery. Like he's got a lot of great qualities. It's just not always for me, and that's a complete personal thing. But even still, this match had me absolutely hooked by the end. They earned my attention and they demand it. And I think it's it's kind of a masterclass in simple storytelling. They're not doing that many crazy high spots. They're not doing a lot of flashy things. They're telling a really good wrestling story, and that's all you really need sometimes. And so I think this was an excellent match in that regard, and wound up being, again, to me, just sort of this as an objective observer, attempted objective observer, great wrestling, even if it's not my favorite version of wrestling.
Yeah, Rude really shines here, in my opinion, too. Really milking his heel work.
Yeah, I
really thought he really shined. I wrote it twice in my notes. That still work. It was really good. The pile driver that Rude really hurt my neck. And this was really good. I echo everything he said. Chono is a very contentious wrestler in our fandom.
Sure.
He's very contentious because let's say it, you got lazy towards the end. Let's say it. But this all good Chono. This is what made Chono a star. You know.
Absolutely.
And his fiery aspect, he's strong as an ox. I agree. I really agree with everything you said.
Yeah, and the thing about this match is really weird is, like, I think for whatever reason, Rude looks out of place in Japan to me. So whenever I see him in Japan, it feels like this weird kind of like dream match scenario that shouldn't happen, even though like it's not a like crazy odd thing. It just seems weird to me. So I think that added a little bit to it. This just felt to me at least like a very special occasion, even more so than somehow the G1 final, which it was. So it had a lot going for it. It's again a great wrestling match. It gets nominated and it finished in the with 300 and something. That's impressive. So it's got people who it resonates with a lot more than me because it's a great wrestling match.
Now we go to NJPW, and this is the match that really shocked me. Not thinking it wasn't going to be good, but blew my mind. In how it's Manami, Toyota, and Toshiyo Yamada versus Dynamite, Kansai, and Mayumi Ozaki for 1193 Dream Slam 2. 2 out of 3 falls. It just starts off with a sky high power bomb, and you just knew Kansai meant business, and it was just fast and furious. It was interesting. The camera work was a little erratic at times, but the camera work matched the erratic nature of this match. Yamada took a lot of punishment in the second fall. The pacing is nuts. The dive sequences were nuts. The second fall I already rated it at 4 3/4 by the second fall. The third fall, the pacing is just the same. I just marveled at the pacing of everything. Their flexibility, skill and degree of difficulty was so high. Is incredible, just incredible. This is a 5-star match.
I couldn't agree more. This is my favorite of the trilogy. So these two teams have a trilogy of matches, and I think a lot of people prefer the first one. It's another great match. I would go watch it. I watched the first one before this one on the rewatch for our original podcast, which has obviously been a little bit now. So if I'm missing some of the details or forgetting them, it's because of that. But this is, I think, just one of the best tag matches I've ever seen. So what you get is Dynamite Kansai hits the big power bomb at the very beginning, and you get sort of what is the equivalent of kind of a flash knockout. You get this surprising finisher early on that catches the other team off guard, and they get a quick pin. And you then have this insurmountable sort of obstacle that Yamada and Toyota have to overcome. They've got a lot to do. They got a lot of work to do. And that second fall is just, to me, the bread and butter of this. It's an absolutely fantastic fall. It's an absolutely fantastic part of the match. And that's where Yamada and Toyota fight their way back into it. And Dynamite Kansai and Ozaki are just so villainous in this. They're like a team that's just mean. And I think that really sets a great tone for the match and keeps everything. It's not just a matter of the kind of urgency and action and the pacing, but there's a real kind of character to it. I think the entire time everybody's personality comes out in their offense, and they all sort of serve different purposes in the match. So I think the dynamic here is great. I think the story is really, really good and builds off of much of what we see in the first match. So like it is kind of an investment, but if somebody's looking for some good wrestling to watch, that 1-2 punch of these two, the first two out of 3 fall matches between these teams, is a really good way to spend your time if you're a wrestling fan. I also always say, I think I've mentioned it before, maybe it was in the podcast we lost. When I first started watching Joshi, I thought it's not a good Joshi match unless you think someone has died at some point, because of just the reckless abandon at which a lot of these women are throwing their bodies around the ring. And there are a few spots in this match that you really think like, oh, wow, that person's done. And they are the toughest human beings to ever walk the face of the earth, because they just keep getting up and keep coming back. So this match has tons of drama. I think it's a really great story. The pacing is out of this world, but I don't think, for my taste at least, they don't lose any of the psychology that at least Joshi at this time period is kind of built on. It might seem a little bit odd if you're kind of holding it to other standards, or thinking about it. I should say this: if you're thinking about this in context of maybe modern wrestling or 80s US wrestling, or different styles and time periods, I think Joshi can kind of feel like a little too frantic sometimes. But once you kind of get into that time period of women's wrestling in Japan, there is a pretty good consistent logic to how things work. And it's one of my favorite styles and eras of wrestling because of that, and because of how much action they can fit into a match in a way that still feels like it's building a really solid story. And I think this is one of the better stories that we get from that period.
Yeah, I totally agree. I get it.
Yeah. This made my top 100, and will make my top 100 again. This is I also have this at 5 stars.
Yeah. I couldn't imagine any 4 other people doing this match.
No. it's a crazy pace that they keep.
Masahiro Kawada, 102. This placed 102 in the greatest match ever poll. The rematch of 6-3-94, which is often referred to as the greatest match ever. Number 3 in 2020, number 2 in 2019. Mm-hmm. A really fast and furious Kawada.
Oh, you broke up there real quick. You there?
Greatest match ever. Number 3 in 2020, number 2 in 2019. It was a fast and furious start. Kawada's really intense, working over the eye of Misawa. I loved Kawada's stoic charisma. Like Kawada's attack over the eyes. Kawada's just destroying Misawa, and then Misawa shows no mercy. They just crescendo in a way that no one else knows how to do. In my opinion, the urgency is real and fiery. Misawa's first glimpse at a comeback is great. Both men are great here. Head drops galore. Fever pitch. The spinning elbow was nasty. That finished it all. 5 stars. This was great.
Yeah, this was a kind of, I don't want to say like shocker to me in how much I enjoyed it, but it was, I don't know that I'd watched this match since I sort of started watching, in terms of, thinking about star ratings and all those things. I probably watched this forever ago when I first started getting into All Japan Wrestling, and I was kind of blown away by this. I've heard people say that some people say that they like it a little better than the 6-3-94 match, and I think I might have originally thought that was just people being hot takey and wanting to have something interesting to say, but I kind of could get it. I could understand this, because if you think about like sort of where this is positioned, right? So you brought up the 6-3-94 match between the two, which is, considered kind of collectively as one of the greatest matches ever. But it also comes a month after 6-9-95, where Kawada pins Misawa in another match that is kind of considered the greatest match ever. And if you mentioned that, you broke up a little bit when you were talking, so I'm sorry to repeat you if you mentioned it. But I think those are both really important, right? It's a year after Misawa defeats Kawada in this really high-profile match, and a month after Kawada finally gets a pin over Misawa, when Kawada and Taue are throwing everything at Misawa. So Kawada's got some momentum. It feels like he's got Misawa's number really early in this. Everything Misawa throws at Kawada, he's ready for, and Kawada really has the advantage early on. And the weird thing is, it kind of seems like Misawa doesn't have an answer except throw elbows and throw them like your life depends on it. And of course, he works other aspects of his offense into the match as he goes. But I think a lot of the transitions, a lot of the fiery spots, a lot of the hope spots were built around Misawa just going to this thing that he has and knows and can always work, and just not going down, just being the ace that won't die. And ultimately he's able to come out on top because he's Misawa. Like, there's really just kind of no other way around it. So in a way, I actually might like the story and the logic of this match better than the 94 match. I don't want to, I don't want to again be too much in the moment with this because I haven't watched the 94 match in a little while, but this is a really well thought out match that I think has a lot of character in how the match is built and what it's built around. And I could totally understand why there are people who champion it maybe even a little bit more than that match from the year before. I don't know that this match makes my list right now. I have it at 4 3/4, and that's kind of tentative. I might star this or highlight this to watch again before I submit my ballot. But it's a great match that's pretty borderline to me. It could definitely find its way onto my list.
Yeah, I have this at 5. That the story in this match is just phenomenal.
Right.
Yeah, early is the basis of this match, and I love that. And the urgency,
Mm-hmm.
it's something I harp on a lot.
Yeah, I do too.
I'm still urgency here. It's just marvelous.
Mm-hmm.
And then the finishing sequences are phenomenal, but that's why I rated it at 5. Misawa and Kawada, you can't go any better than that.
Yeah, they're fantastic. It's also a match that I think is like, it's probably a little bit more like legible to people who don't have a lot of experience watching 90s All Japan. A lot of the big epics are a little bit longer and they're built in these sort of like nuanced back and forths. And that's not to say that people can't like understand that, obviously, but they kind of require a lot of focus, I think, sometimes, to get the details, right? You can always get the big offense and the big exchanges and the finishers and so on and so forth, but to really kind of get what makes them these beloved matches, you've got to kind of pay attention. And this match, you can get a lot out of it by giving it that level of attention. But I think that overarching story of Kawada dominating early and having Misawa's number is really, really easy to pick up on. And I don't even think you'd necessarily need to know much about their history to get a lot out of that. So you can add a lot to your enjoyment by having all this context. But this strikes me as one that is probably pretty easy to like and get into, regardless of your experience watching 90s All Japan or whether you know who these people are or not.
I agree. I very much agree with that. Next time, we have here John Cena, Brock Lesnar, Seth Rollins, 125-15 Royal Rumble, which I was at. Jushin Liger, Naoki Sano, 8-10-89, which New Japan Pro Wrestling. Destroyer Giant Baba. I'm very interested in this one.
Yeah, I like that one a lot.
I talked about Giant Baba the last time.
I like that a lot. I get to defend Giant Baba this time.
You got to defend Giant Baba, JWA, 1969. And then Chris Benoit, Chris Jericho versus Steve Austin and Triple H. Triple H tears his quad in this one.
Ooh, does he ever?
Does he ever? Yeah. And you see it in all of its glory. And then we throw a bonus match in there, not randomly generated, but Brody Lee passed away. It's on the project. Shield, Wyatt family, Elimination Chamber. Rest in peace, Brody Lee.
Yep. Excited to talk about all those.
Party of Brody Lee to the masses.
Yeah, it's and it'll be a couple weeks after his passing, and obviously, that's not going to make it any easier for anybody, particularly those close to him. But it's a good chance and reason to go enjoy some Brody Lee matches, some Luke Harper matches, and to really take some time with somebody's best work. And I often find myself, when a wrestler passes away, diving into some of their work, and I did a little bit of that with Brody Lee over the last couple of days, and great wrestler, and this is one of his best, so I'll be looking forward to talking about that with y'all.
Yeah, and this was one of his best. I watched it like right when I heard the news, and I it not even objectively, I rated it 4 3/4. It was awesome.
Yeah, and we won't talk about it, but I would suggest everybody go watch what I actually believe was his last match. The chain match with Cody is that's one I also revisited, kind of thinking about matches at the end of the year, and that's one I think is really, really good, and the build up to that was excellent too. Some of his best work.
Yeah, I agree. So, rest in peace, Brody. Plugs.
So, as always, you can find me at Markout Mountain on Twitter, and then at gweprojects.freeforums.net for the greatest match ever projects, where we're talking about all of these matches and breaking them down and having discussions and so on.
Yes. DJ D Kooks on Twitter, and I am on that forum as well.
Yep, great. Thanks for having me on again, for doing this little makeup episode. I didn't want to see our work go to waste, so I was happy to come and talk to you today.
Yep. Thank you.
Yep.